I would always wear the youth large, and it was, incredibly unflattering, but I still did it. And the tightest possible pants. We would buy women's jeans, boot cut. It was, that was the phase we went through, and swoopy hair.
Welcome, everyone, to This Was The Scene, the podcast that takes a look back at the late 90s, early 2000 punk scene. I am your host, Mike Doyle. Prevent Falls was a post-hardcore band from New Jersey that existed from 1998 to 2003. Their members included Jeff, Nash, PJ, and Nick. And you might remember that PJ and Nash later on went to join Ben Jorgenson in Armor for Sleep, which you can hear Ben's interview, which is episode 46, if you'd like to, after you listen to this interview. Not a lot out there about these guys, so I just grabbed a write-up from lambgoat.com, which is old, but this is what they said. Equalvision cites similarities between the band and such groups as Helmet and Quicksand with an indie punk twist. The band has been in existence since 1998 and have previously self-released a full-length entitled Solutions Have Problems. Their EVR debut is slated for release in March of 2002. Look for the band on the road this fall, playing numerous weekend shows on the East Coast and eventually on tour next summer to support the album. Obviously, this is an old write-up because of what I just fucking read. Luckily, I bumped into Nick through Instagram, and I was able to get him on the Skype, and this is what we chat about. Salvation Army t-shirts, what it was like being the young band, making their own merch, finding his bass sound, getting on Equalvision Records, playing shows with Coheed, touring with Under Oath, and a ton more. You should go give their Instagram a follow. It's instagram.com. Instagram. Just go to Prevent Falls. You'll be able to follow them there. I also have a link in the show notes, so you could just click that and go there and give them a follow and a couple likes on their images or photos and videos and shit. This is the last episode of 2020, and I'd like to thank all of the listeners for your support this year. Because of you, the podcast broke 100,000 downloads, which was fucking awesome, and has been gaining a continuous fan base throughout the year. So thank you very much. I love all of you for this. This has been really as crazy as this year is, and as crazy as everyone keeps saying it's crazy, because it's crazy, and how probably fucking sick you are of hearing that. This thing has given, hopefully, people some sanity and got their minds to think about shit other than all the other crap that was going on. So I appreciate everyone listening, and I look forward to bringing new interviews that you love in 2021 when we are all vaccinated and hugging once again. Real quick, 3 ways to support the podcast. 1, go to patreon.com/thiswasthescene. You can sign up for $1 a month, and thank you for everyone who is a Patreon. I don't really know the things that I could do to add value there, except for just the fucking interviews that I do. But if I can think of them, then I can make tiers like $3 a month or $5 a month, but I don't really know to do that with this stuff. So the $1 a month is great, and everyone who has subscribed, that is very helpful with all the bills. 2, you could donate one time at thiswasthescene.com. Just scroll down, there's a purple button on the top there. You could donate through Venmo or PayPal, and whatever you like. 3, you could buy merch on thiswasthescene.com, and I definitely don't guarantee that this shit will get to you before Christmas. So this will get to you after Christmas, but it'll be a nice little surprise. Well, not really a surprise, but you'll be excited that you'll have something coming in the mail after Christmas. Cool. Feel free to subscribe, leave a review, and share this with anyone who would love some punk rock nostalgia. With that said, let's get started.
I will disclose now that I will mess many names up and probably lots of time periods if we go into details from way back. It'll be a lot of fun, but I'm going to definitely mess people's names up. I was even trying to jog my own memory when I was putting this together, like when I was preparing for this.
A couple things. I love that people prepare for this because I literally never prepare for these interviews. Yeah, I open up a ton of browser windows in front of me just to have things to kind of like reference, but I don't read up on other interviews that people have done, which you probably heard a bunch of times where I'm trying to ask them questions that they haven't been asked before. But the cool thing is that like I like talking to people that haven't done a ton of interviews in like the last 10 years or so, or like I can't find them as easily, because that shit's really cool because I'm literally learning all this stuff on the fly, which is exciting. And, you know, it keeps it like real. Because if I'm if I'm asking people questions that they've already been asked, like one, they're like so fucking sick of answering them again. And also, it's like I already know the answer, so I'm like, "Hey, what happened with that thing? I don't know what happened." I'd rather.
Totally.
So
You come off as a person who has done more research than you let on because, I've listened to not all the episodes, but I've listened to a very decent portion when you started this podcast. I sent you a message way back when you first started.
yeah,
You talked a lot about your feelings about how you acted when you were 16, 17, 18, 19 years old in the scene and how you are now, and reflecting on your own behavior, which I really connected with. And then also you did a bunch of, interviews with people I either really wanted to hear from and never knew, or people that I played with, or people that I was connected to and really wanted to hear their stories. And then, of course, you always hope every once in a while, like, I'm going to admit it, like I hope every once in a while somebody's going to shout me out or shout shout Prevent Falls out and be like, oh yeah, that's right. I was like, you get a little excited just to hear where you are in their story. If it doesn't happen often, obviously, but it's very enjoyable.
thanks, man. No, I appreciate that. I actually just did that yesterday because I got an advanced copy of In Defense of Ska, the Aaron Carnes book. I don't know if you heard his interview, but he played in a ska band back in the day in California that they weren't around for too long, and then he roadied for like one tour with Skank and Pickle. But he's a huge fan of ska, and he wrote this book, which is just like a plug for it because it's actually really cool. It's all about ska and him sticking up for ska because he felt that no one really pays a fair tribute to ska.
Yeah, that's fair. I would say that that's true. I mean, I think that it was such a big influence on the scene back in the day in those late 90s that it gets talked about, but it doesn't get the credit of how widespread and popular it was. Oh, yeah. And how many bands there were, and then just all the touring and some of the national acts that would come through that would really put on an incredible show. And I do agree with you. I think they get lost in the shuffle a little bit because fewer of them hit as many major labels or, had videos on MTV2 or whatever. I think it does get lost. So that's really interesting.
Well, it's almost like, this is kind of a stretch, but nowadays with social media, if something comes out and I can see something when it comes out without anyone's narrative around it, and I can form my own opinion on what I think. But then I'll start seeing people shit on it, and I'll start thinking, oh, well, maybe I was wrong in thinking that I liked it because it sounds like everyone says it's shitty. So now I'm going to start. I mean, as an adult, I can stand my ground pretty well, but I think younger version of me would start to skew and say, yeah, you're right, fuck that. And that's kind of what I did with ska. And,
totally.
I mean, I can listen to some ska now. There's I'm kind of jumping all around here, but there's this band, I've mentioned them currently. What are they called? They're on Fat, and oh my god, they're a ska band, and they're so fucking good. Get Dead.
I've heard of them, but I haven't really listened to them much.
It's like these guys look like, I hope this never gets around to them. The singer looks like he's been in jail. Like he is just this like dirty, the band is just like these dirty looking dudes in a positive way, not like in a shitty,
that was a quality back in the day. That was a quality. If you looked like a shitty grungy dude, it meant you were putting the work in and this was your life.
Well, it's like you watch this guy, he played at Fat Mike's house when he had that concert a couple months ago, where he had a bunch of fat bands came and everyone's walking around with face masks on, but they're playing like not in his pool, like on his patio in front of his pool. And these guys are playing, and the singer, he's so into it, but he has his own style, and he just kind of like zones out, but it looks so fucking awesome. And he just looks like he's just been, it's like when you would go on tour and you meet up with that band that had been touring for so long that the road is just like embedded in their fucking clothes and their skin. And you're like, it's like At the Drive-In always looked like that.
Definitely.
These guys look like that. But real quick to finish the point, when I was reading this book, In Defense of Ska, which people should pre-order now, and I'm not being paid to say this. It's just really cool, and Aaron gave me a copy. As I'm reading it, as you said before, how you're hoping that someone mentions your band's name in an interview. I'm like reading the book, being like, I wonder if they're gonna mention Lanemeyer. Like, I wonder if anyone was influenced by us, because it's like there's always that ego
Totally.
that's gonna exist, and that's it's like, as long as you can catch that and you don't like live that way all the time and you're looking for that, but that everyone does that shit where they're like, oh, I hope they do that. And they're like, but it's innocent.
It's innocent. I mean, when we look at the scene page on Facebook, or you look at some of the other Instagram handles that get like show flyers and stuff, I always look to see if Prevent Falls had an old flyer or was on there. It just makes me feel like we had a presence in the scene, and that we were a part of shows, and that people who knew who we were, and that they enjoyed us. And, you just kind of want to be remembered because it was such a big impact on your life. And it just, it feels good. It feels heartwarming when people say, oh, I really loved that Prevent Falls record, or they were really great live, or whatever the case may be. It's just heartwarming to be like, man, those were some great years.
Well, that also goes back to when I'm doing these interviews, every time I do have a browser window open, it's always photos of everyone from 20 years ago. Yeah. So in my mind, when I'm talking to people, I know they don't look exactly the same, but I typically am looking at old photos. So when we're talking, all I have as a reference visually is that old photo of when we were 18 or 20 or sometimes 16 and 24 or whatever. So the fact that my brain, when I'm doing these interviews or when I'm thinking about this shit all the time, or I'm thinking about who to ask to interview, like my headspace is there all the time. So it's almost like visually I'm still there. So everyone else is like, man, it's been so long. But for me, it's really not, because I'm just
you're in it thinking about it, like looking things up.
All the
man,
I
couldn't look more different than when I did back then, right? I really, I was skinny and I had a lot of hair, and now I'm not skinny and I don't have any hair. So, it's a very, very different look. But so it's really funny when every once in a while I'll post a photo from Prevent Falls days on my regular Instagram, and some of my friends who haven't known me for that long will just be shocked. They'll just be like, I can't believe that's you as a human being.
Well, there's a photo of you guys. I have the Equalvision page open.
Yes.
It's the four of you. Where are you in the photo? Are you wearing the Coke-a-Zit shirt, or are you?
Oh, yes. I am the Coke-a-Zit shirt. Yes. I was that guy. I loved that shirt. It was very common for us to get all of our clothes at thrift shops and look for we would go through, spend hours just looking through shirts, try to find something that we really liked. And, I wore that shirt a ton.
Real quick, that brings up a point. Thrift shops. Every photo that I love, every photo that everyone posts has that shirt, like your Coke-a-Zit shirt, right? I had a shirt. It was Good Banking is Good People, and I got it at a thrift shop. Yeah, it was like my favorite. I still have it. It is like, it's almost ready to just disintegrate. But I've had this fucking thing. I bought it in Dover, at the Dover Salvation Army, and that's where we started getting our clothes. Yeah. Two things I loved about those clothes. One, I don't know about you, but I fucking hate really rough shirts like Gildan. I fucking hate Gildan because it's like sandpaper. Totally. But I needed soft shirts. They're pre-worn, and then the funny slogans were perfect. So for you, what were your standards back then of buying a shirt?
Well, similar for us, right? You're always looking for something very comfortable. And back then we wore much tighter clothes because we were all pretty skinny. We were so young when we were doing this, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, around there, when Prevent Falls was really doing what it was doing. This has been such a great exploration as I went through some old photos probably 6 months ago. And every photo I looked at, everybody's wearing a different random shirt that they found at a thrift store that represented some random New Jersey business that put out shirts, and it was beat to hell, and it just had random graphics. And it was always about having something that was a great solid color, like an orange or red or green, with a random logo or phrase, and really soft and as small as you could find it. Those were the criteria when searching through. Nothing boxy, nothing too big. It had to be tight. It had to be, really kind of stand out so that people looked at it, then looked at it again and were like, gave you a thumbs up, like, that's a great shirt.
Yeah.
Good find.
They gave you the thumbs up or like the nod, like, oh, that's
Yeah.
cool. You're like, yeah, I found this. And it was like you had to earn it. So even now when I go to Target or like Walmart or something, if I see a shirt when they're trying to create that, but it's being sold at Target, at 41, I'm like, no, I would never fucking buy that. I have to
Absolutely
find
not.
that. If I found that fucking shirt in a thrift store, then I would buy that.
I agree completely. You can't go back. It's either authentic or it's not.
Actually, I'm gonna just don't go into this too deep. Just be like, this is when it was. But when did you guys form again?
We officially became Prevent Falls in 1996. We were a band before that.
Okay, stop there. So I want to say that because you're saying that you would look for the tight shirts and all that. I remember when we started buying this shit, and everyone listening, I'm not gonna talk about fucking clothing the whole time, but like everyone's like, what the fuck? But
so many phases during that period. So many phases.
I think that people listening, they're gonna remember their shirt or a couple shirts that they used to wear all the time that was their favorite shirt ever. So that's what I'm trying to do for everyone to like remember that. But I remember when we first started buying, when we got in the scene, the punk scene or whatever, we would buy the baggiest fucking clothes and we were skinny as hell. And then when it bled into about 2000, that's when it's almost like everyone just started shrinking their clothes, and then guys would wear the tightest jeans even in the hottest summer and the tightest shirts, and I was always like,
totally,
what the fuck?
We were 100% guilty of that, and I will say that
when
we first started playing together, we would wear Jankos and we would wear really baggy clothes I would fit in now, being like 100 pounds heavier than I was back then. And it's incredible how it phased just through a few years from exactly what you said. It was big baggy clothes. I would have like a Korn t-shirt or a basketball jersey. It was ridiculous. I went through a lot of bad phases. And then it was either thrift store shirts or plain black tight t-shirts. I had a nickname for a while called Youth Large because I would always buy the Youth Large shirt of the bands that we played with or other bands that were on tour. And I would always wear the Youth Large, and it was, incredibly unflattering, but I still did it. And the tightest possible pants. We would buy women's jeans, boot cut. It was, that was the phase we went through. And swoopy hair, it was a progression through just a few short years.
I fucking hated that look so much.
It was so bad.
I hated it so much because it was like that carried into 2000, and that became what people. It's like they became a band just to do that. And I was like, oh, man. All right. So I want to go back. Let's kind of jump back a little bit and talk about the time where you started wearing baggy clothes. And where in Jersey did you grow up?
I grew up in Summit, New Jersey.
Are you still there? Or where are you at?
I'm in California now, in Los Angeles.
Okay. You're definitely not in Summit.
Definitely not there anymore.
A lot of people... I think a lot of people still live close to their hometown or like right by it. Because I guess because of family and all, especially in Jersey, like no one fucking leaves. So
Nash and PJ, who are in Prevent Falls, are both still in New Jersey. I think PJ is in Maplewood or South Orange, where he grew up in Maplewood, and so did Nash. And Nash, I believe, I know he's in Jersey, but I'm not sure where. He may be towards Asbury. I'm not 100%.
It seems like if you're in Jersey, you're going to most likely be, depending, I don't know, there's
a Brunswick contingent, there's the South Jersey contingent, then there's the people who stay home. Jeff is out here in Los Angeles. We live not too far from each other.
That's
so
cool.
There's two of us out here in LA and two back in New Jersey.
Do you ever meet up with, I'm just saying Ben Jorgenson, just because Nash went on and did Armor for Sleep with him. Were you friends with him?
Nash and PJ both went on to be in Armor for Sleep. Ben does live out here, but we haven't connected in person. I'm closer with Jeremiah Glazer, who was in Random Task as well, as another guitarist. So when he's here, we've tried to make it work with Ben, and Ben and I have chatted through social media, but it hasn't worked out for us to get together. But Ben's a great dude. It just hasn't been helpful.
Yeah, like even now, it's when you get older, people are like, we should get together. You're like, yeah, okay. I'm kind of used to doing my thing, but it's like I'm kind of really into my routine. Like, well,
Yeah. I think
okay.
that at some point, I think we're really going to try to make an effort just to, reminisce and catch up. And obviously, when times are better than they are now, possibly, when Armor is able to go back out and do their 15th anniversary tour, hopefully, I'll be able to meet up with them when they do their Los Angeles dates.
I think it's so interesting. Sorry, I totally cut you off. Go on, please.
No, it's no worries. I was just going to say, it's really difficult, especially in Los Angeles, when, Ben could be 10 miles away, but that could be an hour, and we both are busy, and so on and so forth. So, it's hard. It's just hard to make it happen. But, I think it'll happen at some point.
What was the thing that got you going to shows? Was it being in a band first, or did you do the band thing after you started going to shows?
Well, it was kind of twofold. Jeff had gotten me to buy a bass to start playing, jamming around in our friend's basement when we were 12. He was like, "You're going to be a bassist. We're going to start a band." So we were 12 years old playing in a basement, just screwing around. And he was really getting into music, and we were really good friends. And he was like, "Come on, we're doing this." And I was like, "Great, sounds fun." So we started playing a little bit. We weren't playing shows or anything. We were just kids messing around, covering mostly NoFX songs and things of that nature. Actually, the first show I went to was a show in New Providence. I think is it the Italian American or American Legion? I can't remember what it was called, but there was a really great venue in New Providence. It was I didn't even know about Fat Records that much. I just knew about a couple of the bands. And they had a Fat Records tour going through New Jersey, and it was Strung Out, Diesel Boy, Feeble, Suicide Machines, and just like an incredible lineup, right? And I knew nothing about most of these bands. And I was impressed the entire time, and it was packed, and that place only holds like 200 people. And I was pretty young. I was like, going out of middle school into high school or whatever. We'd go to the show, and it was completely wild, and all the bands were good. And then at the end, the last band that played was Bigwig. They play, and people lost their minds because they're incredible, right? Yeah. That was the first time I ever saw Bigwig. And at the end of the show, Tom passed us, and I was just like, holy shit, this is what we need to do. This is incredible. And we kind of went all in after that. Jeff and I did, because it was just so exciting, and the shows was amazing. And we just started going tons of shows. And then we started to play more and more until, we finally, all the little bands that never did anything, all the little in your basement type, groups that never did anything, eventually ended up coming together with the four of us. And then we started playing a lot more shows.
What was your first band?
Well, I joined. So Jeff had been playing with Nash in a band called Orco, which was like with a couple of other people from New Jersey. And this was probably like late middle school time. And then Nash and PJ are cousins. So they were connected, and PJ was in another band called Super Tuesday way back then. And then Jeff and I had played in the basement a couple of years before that. And he's like, "Listen, our bassist is our friend Justin, didn't want to play in the band anymore. Do you want to come join us?" And so we were called Tap back then, which was, a very poorly constructed band name. And I joined the group basically after they did their first recording at Portrait Studios. Actually, I joined right after they did that. That was about 14, I think we were 14. And then a couple years later, or a year or so later, we turned into Prevent Falls after we decided we needed to change our name as we started to play more shows and record new music and things like that. So really my first real band was Prevent Falls.
Okay. And then Tap, T-A-P.
Tap. Yeah. There are songs out there that I don't know if they're out there, but there is a whole record that was recorded.
I'm going to look
before that.
I'm going on.
You're never going to find it. There's no chance.
I went on the NJPP archives because Joe Polito, in his magic, he usually will have that, but he does not. Tag Your It is the first one on the T page.
I'm not sure it's going to be found ever, and it's probably for the best.
Yeah, but you recorded that at Portrait?
They did. I joined the band right after, but yes, they recorded that at Portrait.
Interesting. We actually, I just messaged Badami, or I tagged Badami in a post because we recorded with him like way back in the day with this band Congress of Cows before Lanemeyer, and we had these 3 songs. So Chris, who was in Lanemeyer, he just commented literally like right now before we start talking on the Lanemeyer page, and he's like, "Hey, do we have those demos?" And I tagged Portrait Studios. I'm like, "I'm sure Chris has that." So if he has that, then and that was like 96, 97.
It would be a couple years before that. That would have been like 94-ish.
Wait, so you guys recorded with him in 94?
I believe so. Like I said, I came in right after.
I don't know, man. How old are you?
94, 95?
How old are you?
Something like that. I'm 38.
I don't know, dude, because Badami really wasn't recording any punk music until like 96, 97, I think.
It's possible. It's possible that it was 96.
Yeah, man.
Like I said, gets a little fuzzy for me. It's possible that it was 96.
Because I'm not trying to. I'm just gonna we were like one of the first bands to find Chris, like find Portrait Studios, because Barker, he had this girl, Jesus Christ, he's gonna kill me forgetting her name, Tracy Baugh. She was friends with Badami, and we were looking for a place to record. She goes, "Oh, I have a buddy of mine in Pequannock, and you should go record with him." This is back when he was playing in his band Gate, and he was just doing more like rock bands or metal bands or something, and we found him. Then like Right Ternetti started going to him. That was right on the time where Badami got found, and then Niclario got found with Nada Studios up in New York.
So you know what? I'm gonna revise my timeline just a touch. So I would say you're
goddamn
probably
better.
Right. I know. Well, listen, like I said, I wasn't a part of that recording. Things are fuzzy, man. 20 plus years ago. So I'd say it was probably 96 that was recorded, maybe 97. And then 98 is when we officially became Prevent Falls.
Okay, so let's talk about that. At that point, so 97, 98, we were talking earlier about ska and how that was in and then really started getting phased out. Where if you were a ska band, people were like, ugh. And then hardcore, who was I talking about this with? I think it was James from Slow Gherkin or Dave from Mustard Plug, I think. But I was trying to compare sounds of music with, like, ska was kind of like the aggressive rollerblading. It was like, It started off fun. Everyone was like, fuck that shit. Hardcore was like skating. Like, it never got lame. And punk too. Like punk had different iterations where it got to hair punk, but it was like, it could still kind of mix. I think it would kind of go in between the rollerblading and the skateboarding, now that I think about it. So like around that time, this is when Fat Records is huge, ska's kind of fading out, hardcore, like Victory was big. So when you guys started Prevent Falls, like when you're in the scene and starting writing your songs, like what did you guys come together and say, like, we want to sound like this?
Well, our influences were a little bit different. I will say that I think we're influenced by, I have an older brother who was listening to a bunch of post-hardcore prior to me really getting into all the types of music that I got into. And I think as a group, we were pretty heavily influenced with Quicksand and Helmet and early Silverchair and things of that nature. We were a little bit more of a post-hardcore type of outfit. And we did take a lot of influence of the stuff we were seeing around us, right? There were a lot of bands that were playing that, we felt like we really loved what they were doing and just could see a lot of different influences there. But it was such a blend for us. Thursday was a group that we really just, when we saw them play live, it was just mind-blowing. And I think that had an impression on us. And just so many other groups that we saw back then were so impressive. And I think it seeped into different aspects of the songwriting. So it's really hard to pinpoint a bunch of really close scene influences. I mean, Bigwig made such an impression from a performance and music standpoint. The guitar playing that Tom has, the drumming that Matt does. It's so incredible. And I think a lot of that record stuff was, I think Strung Out is their work has been so good for so long. And they have some of that post-hardcore influence in there a little bit. But we were, I would call us like slightly to the left of a lot of what was really happening at that time. We had a little bit more of a post-hardcore type of style. But we loved so many bands we were seeing. We played a lot with Random Task. They were incredible. We played a lot with Penfold. They were amazing. We kind of were definitely feeling a lot of the influences that were around us, and I think it had different touches within the songwriting.
Two things there. Like, one, I was thinking about how you said Bigwig was such an influence in early age, but then you went on and saw Thursday, and I think Thursday kind of matches more where you guys went, like as far as like style and things like that. But I was gonna ask like, why did you choose that? But then I'm looking back at just the bands that were going on, like I mean, just me personally, not to hijack this, but it's like I'd be like, well, I loved Weston, and I loved Quicksand, and I loved like Sunny Day Real Estate, but that never really. It's like what really influenced me is like what came out of me with playing. It wasn't because if I tried to rip off songs, if I tried to make songs like those bands, it just wouldn't work. So it's like you can like those bands and want to be like them, but you're just naturally going to write what you're going to write.
Right. And I think
have it kind of morph.
Totally. And I think that's what you could see in a bunch of our work that is really, and it constantly evolved. The songs really did kind of evolve over, and you would hear different styles within both of our records. I think that it's a really good point that you make, is that we had a lot of influences, but the way we wrote as the four of us was kind of, and the way we like kind of brought songs together through practicing and playing a lot was really what just kind of made it a little bit of our own.
Do you remember your first show?
Yes.
That you played as Ben Folds?
I do remember. I'm not going to have a good date for you on this, but I'm going to tell you that it was.
I don't need to like the exact date.
No. It was at the Cove in Roselle Park. And I remember it was the first time I had played a show after the old bassist, Justin, had stopped playing with them. And I kind of came in, and then we started to kind of just do it more often. And we were just really having a great time. And I remember, there was like not a lot of people there. And I remember being super nervous, like really nervous before we were about to play, because I had never performed music in front of people before. It was really my first show. I do imagine it was probably 96 or so, 96, 97. I got on stage and I had this kind of, if you want to call the Cove a stage, but there was no more anxiety when we got on stage to play. I felt so enthralled and so calm. And I just kind of realized that performing was something that I really enjoyed almost immediately. That's about as much detail as I can remember. I don't even know who played with us back then. I'm not sure anybody of any consequence played with us at that show. We did play the Cove, though, with Outline and with Random Task a few times back then.
That makes sense.
In the early days, but I don't think it was the first show that I played.
Did you guys? I'm gonna jump forward for a second and then jump back. Because it just popped in my head. I never thought about, because Outline and Random Task were coming up. They were the younger bands when we had already been playing for a couple of years, and like Humble and like Right Turn Eddie and Taxi Cab, One Cool Guy, and like all those bands. So we were the bands that kind of like, we were a next, I don't know which wave we were, prior to us. There was all like the Morris kind of youth crew kids and the hardcore kids and like bands that I've talked to before that were the early 90s. And we kind of came in like the mid going out of the 90s and like established that next wave. And then you guys were a part of that wave that came after us. So like when you guys started to grow in the scene and like in Outline and Random Task started getting more popular and things like that and playing shows with them, like you guys obviously, I'm guessing we're starting to see more people show up for you guys. And then these other bands are starting to fade away. Like, do you remember what that looked like to you when that started to happen?
Yeah. Well, there are a couple things that helped that along for us. In Summit was Christchurch, and Jeff ran a lot of the shows that were at Christchurch and Summit. And we would try to get a lot of bands that we really liked to play there and put on shows. And as we did that, more and more people started to notice us, I think, and like our music. And I will say I did notice that a little bit, and kind of that feeling of people noticing us a little bit more. And I think it helped with us getting on more shows at other venues around New Jersey. And we tried to go basically anywhere anybody would have us, and try to play with with people at all. Like, anybody who was really putting a show together that needed a band, we were totally on board, and we would, work and talk with these other bands. We also played a lot with X Number 5, who were incredible. We would always look out for shows that were happening and kind of try to make some relationships and get on what we could. But a lot of it was also that Jeff was working on putting shows on in Summit and getting more bands to come there, because at the Christchurch they had this big kind of basketball, or like, I don't know what you'd call it, just like a rec center like room, and they had a stage, and we could just like rent a PA and do a whole thing there. And we did a lot of shows. A lot of the pinball bands played there, so we played with a lot of the bands from that group and that kind of era. And I think that it was a thing that kind of grew over time, and I did notice just more people coming up to us and saying things, kind of some more people showing up that we didn't know. So much of our first few years was like people we've been asking to come to shows, and other bands that we're friends with also watching us play. That was like for so long, right? I think everybody goes through that, but it was a lot of that we experienced. And then it eventually, started to grow into people that we didn't know, and then people asking us questions. And the other biggest influence was in terms of people either getting interested in us or showing some fandom, is that there was also a church in New Providence that put on something called the Fire Escape shows. And they used on Friday nights, once a month, they would do this thing called the Fire Escape show. And they would invite everybody, and they'd put out information about getting people into this large portion of their church. And they put this whole stage together, and people really liked us there. And they really liked us, and they like listened to the songs and knew the words. And it was a really big help for us, because we had a friend who was at the church, Doug, who, helped tell his, pastor that, their band is really good. You should have them play. And then people, it was a really great opportunity for us to kind of be in front of a bunch of different people and play with different, in front of various audiences in New Jersey.
Did you ever feel, because you guys were a younger band, you're 4 years younger than me. So at that time, I'm 18, 19, which means that you're 14, 15. So there was that's a big gap between, now I look at an 18-year-old now and they look like
children,
babies, but they look like children. But for what we felt like back then, because we had cars and we could drive, that drove a huge gap between us and anyone who's below 17, because 17 was the driving age back then. So if you're 14 or 15, you're so young in my eyes. Did you guys ever feel, being a band that age, that you felt that other bands were seeing you as the younger bands, like the awe, or like, how did you feel that people were?
I don't know if I want to say like it was more like awe, or more like there was just a separation, and not purposefully, but I will say that for me personally, I felt that divide for a lot of the time that we played, and I don't think anybody did it intentionally, but we were, for almost the entire time that Prevent Falls existed, we were mostly the younger band. Exactly like when we played in the shows, like Lane Meyer and Humble and Midtown and some of the other bands, Thursday, were all 3 or 4 years older than us. And everybody was super cool, there were no issues with that, but it was different, right? It was that we were just a little bit younger, and we were trying to kind of like, get in on the party of everybody doing this.
Yeah, 100%.
And we had to have our parents drive us around until we could finally drive, and then finally get a van, and then finally do it. And then when we did that, we kind of really hit the road in terms of just trying to play out of state, and then trying to get noticed by labels, and then really trying to do that. And then when we got signed, then, we were still the younger band, right? That it wasn't a bad thing, but I personally had the case of wanting to be older and wanting to grow up faster in order for this to be, our career and our life, and not wanting to just be the young kid who it will happen for later.
I never thought about that. Of all these interviews, like with the bands who were younger, I never thought about your guys' perspective about what the older bands thought, because like I remember seeing like Random Tasker Outline play, and I had the perspective like, oh, it's so cool. Like it was never later on there was I wouldn't say respect, that sounds really awful, but there was like, oh, it's the younger bands are here, like Emmanuel. Remember the band Emmanuel?
Yeah.
They were called Emmanuel Nice and they grew in Louisville. We used to play with those guys all the time when they were the young band. We would show up, we're like, oh, it's this little Emmanuel Nice band. And then they just like grew up and they fucking just, their first record on Vagrant was just like fucking amazing. I remember, oh my God, I forget the guitar player's name, but he gave me a copy at Barker's house one time and he's like, oh, check this out. I was like, oh, okay, yeah. And I kind of dismissed it. And then later on, I listened to it. I was like, holy fucking shit, this is so good. But did you feel that when you guys got signed, and I'm not going to go into that, I'm going to jump back a little bit, but after I ask this, but when you got signed to Equalvision, and I know you said that you still felt like the younger band, but did you feel kind of a vindication to the older bands who you might have felt that were like kind of looking down on you, and those are the bands that just, broke up without actually even getting on a label like Equalvision?
I don't know if it would be called vindication. I don't.
Or kind of like a slight like, haha, fuck you guys, but not like aggressive, like, well, fuck these guys. They just treat us like the little band, and now we're on fucking Equalvision, so eat shit.
Well, I will say this, like, getting signed to Equalvision at 19 years old was something that, kind of messed with my head. Like, oh my God, we're gonna do it, right? And like, I had no idea, right? I had no idea what being a professional musician was about, and I had no idea how to do things correctly, and everything was led by emotion so blatantly, right? So I felt really proud, but we also got help from bands putting us on shows, and Jeff Rickley from Thursday had a relationship with the people at Equalvision and helped get us in contact with them and gave us advice. And so, yeah, I felt really proud to be so young and to have this opportunity and to get signed and to think that my career was really starting. And I'm sure there was probably some bands out there that really didn't give us the time of day where I felt really like, hell yeah, look at us now.
Oh, I bet.
I can't remember specific examples, but I'm sure I felt that way. But I also got to give credit to a lot of people who either gave us great advice or did put us on shows or did help us get noticed by labels. I mean, we recorded at Big Blue Meanie Studios to do a demo, and it also happened that Thursday was recording there. And even though we knew them a little bit, we got a little bit closer with them because they were doing Full Collapse around the time that we were going in to record our demos, right? And we got to hear some of those songs there, and we were just like, oh my God, this is incredible. I can't wait. And of course, it was incredible. It was like such a seminal album. And then like the Taking Back Sunday guys, like we didn't know them very well, but we played some shows with them. They were also at Big Blue. And it kind of like we had a little bit of like we kind of had like the older group there that kind of gave us some great advice or got us some connections or some discussions that, I have to give them as much credit as much as, saying that we were like, hey, look at us, we're making it happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's more like a 19-year-old's perspective because you really nailed it on the head. And something that I don't think I've ever really thought about out of doing these interviews is that, I mean, I've said it a couple times, like we were younger, but I don't think I've ever formulated what that really meant for all of us emotionally for that time period. It's like, I think what, you said in the beginning where I've talked about how I've kind of had to apologize for being a shit. Not like being a shit, just being jealous or just, I mean, I think it's natural that at that age, like you don't know what the fuck's going on with anything because everything's happening and you're trying to deal with relationships, you're trying to deal with like growing up, you're trying to deal with like all this crap, and then there's like jealousy because you want to do something. So like,
I was so jealous. Of everybody, like getting like lots of people coming to their shows, and we wanted it so bad. I wanted it so bad for people to like us and for us to play and for us to get signed and for us to go on tour. I was so jealous, and
it's natural.
I was so young, and I thought so many dumb things during that time period, and not really realizing until later how incredibly fortunate we were to even do all the things that we got to do in the short time we did.
Well, I mean, I'm even thinking about now where, you're talking about you're on Equalvision and just what that thought of, and you're like, oh, I didn't really see that as a vindication. I bet I could tell you 100% that if we got signed to a label that was bigger than Drive-Thru, which I don't think was really possible at that time, I would have, younger me would have been like, haha, fuck you, Midtown. Because I was so jealous of them.
I'm sure I had all those thoughts. I'm sure I did. Because you're just so young.
I mean, I'm not trying to turn this into like this. I'm not trying to turn this
totally.
like shit talking thing. I'm just like being honest, be like of where our heads were 20 fucking years ago, and it doesn't carry now. Like now, I was like, I'll text Rob Hitt all the time. I'm like fucking love him, and Heath too. Like, and they were the band that I was so jealous of. So it's like just pinpointing that time period. I mean, like this is really like you coming out and saying like I was so jealous. That seems so natural though, because it also I feel like was a fire to drive you to want to do that, which is almost like you needed.
We needed it. I mean, a lot of credit to all the guys in Prevent Falls, because I think when we were at that age, we fought like hell to be on shows, to play. We practiced every single week without fail, sometimes more. We wrote tons and tons of songs. We tried to make as many connections as humanly possible. We made our own merch. And I think that we really, really wanted it. And that was also a blessing and a curse. Sometimes it led to things being less fun because we were overthinking it as things went on and on and on.
Yeah.
But we really pushed because we really enjoyed it, and it really, I feel like it made high school different for us, or at least for me. My priority when it was the weekend was what shows are we playing, when are we practicing, where are we going, what shows are we going to, what other band things are we trying to move forward with, how are we getting demos out there, how are we trying to get noticed, so on and so forth.
How did you organize that? Or who was the person in the band that you said you focused on that, but who actually executed all that stuff?
So Jeff was a big driving influence for a lot of it. He was like the band leader, Jeff, who was the main songwriter and singer of the band.
Yeah.
He was kind of our de facto band leader, and he pushed a lot of things. Like I said, he put on the shows. We all helped him out with it, but he really kind of drove getting the venue and doing that. I know that Nash and PJ and everybody else, we all tripped in to try to get other show contacts and put things together. But Jeff was a huge driving force for that. But we also worked on a few things together, whether it be the artwork of our, the first record that we just released on our own and kind of burned our own CDs, or, pressing shirts in my house, just like pressing shirts literally with an iron, trying to do that so we can do it in time, printing stickers off on like an old printer on an old PC, and getting like sticker paper and printing them and getting them ready. So Jeff was definitely the band dad, but a lot of us did a lot of things to try and, get everything ready for shows and like push our name out there and make contacts and this, that, and the other.
That's so fucking cool, man. Like just getting your hands dirty like that and doing that with merch, even though, when you got the band sticker that was on paper, that was printed, you knew it and you're like,
oh yeah,
I wish this was vinyl.
I know. You wish. And then when you find out that you can go and like it's like $100 for like 1,000 stickers or what, I don't remember what it was, but it was more than when we had back then. And we'd all just be like, okay, who can give what? Can we each give $25? Like, what's the design going to be? And then we'd find the company, or we'd ask another band, where'd you get your stickers done? And then like, where'd you get your pins done? And we would, it went from really just doing all of the stuff ourselves, literally DIY to the most extreme, to then like, oh my God, we got vinyl stickers now. And then, my goodness, we had 25 shirts printed. Or then, now we've got pins made because they'll do them for like 25 cents each and we can sell them for $1 or whatever. And just having merch felt like a big deal. Having merch was a thing we really wanted to have and be like, we're a real band now. We have merch and we have music that you can purchase. 3
things when you show up to the show. And real quick, just to kind of throw out there, the businesses that we are getting merch from: Fat Rat Press, Tommy Latex, and then fucking Seth from Local Shirts and Sign. Local Shirts, Local Till Death is his handle. He's still doing this shit now. Actually, Tommy's still doing it too. Like these guys are still doing it. I actually tried to get Fat Rat on this like when I first started, but wanted to throw that out there. Also, and Seth is localshirtandsign.com. People are looking for that. But like when you showed up at a show, if you had nice equipment, if you showed up in a van, and you had merch, I mean, when you walked into a show with that, you just felt like, oh, yeah, we got it going on right now.
I remember that feeling. Because I was brought into the music by Jeff, and then it kind of was something that evolved for me. And then, it was about having big cabinets and nice guitars and nice equipment back then, right? Yeah. When you could. And I remember when we finally
Guitar Center credit cards.
Hell yeah. And when we all had like nicer equipment and even had bins with merch in it, and we had our van for the first time, I'll never forget that feeling when like rolling in and literally rolling our cabinets in and putting them to the side and feeling very professional. Oof, man, that was nice.
Did you ever take the time to really learn your bass cabinet to like understand what your sound was personally?
No.
Exactly.
I didn't. No. You want to know is the truth is that I was easily the least talented guy in the band. I feel like I held my own and did what I had to do. But, the other guys were much more, much stronger musicians, and they guided me. And then when I found the sound that I like after guidance, I locked it in. I just, kept it there, and I made sure things were in tune, and I made sure that the settings were where they're supposed to be to sound amazing. And that's what I did. I went through some different cabinets, and, I can remember like just getting used huge 8x10 bass cabinets with like old PV heads. And then eventually, you get something nicer. And then I had like a 4x10 and then a 1x15, and then buying nicer basses and this, that, and the other. And I learned a little bit about dialing it in and doing all those things back then, but really had a little help. Had a help from the bandmates. And then I just made sure it always sounded that good.
Did you have the piece of tape over all the knobs just so you can go, if anyone fucked with it or borrowed your cabinet, you can quickly go back to your settings without having to try to remember it?
I had it written down. I had like a number associated with each one to make sure I knew where it was, to make sure that if it got moved around, I could put it back.
It's such a random thing for people listening to who don't play an instrument to know, but that was a trick that was taught to so many people because we were sharing equipment. Right. So all of your settings would get so thrown off. And then you didn't think about this when you said, and you're getting up there to plug in and you're ready to go on and you're looking at your settings and you're like, what the fuck? Like this. Oh my God. What was my setting? And
changed like, everything. Yeah.
So then there's these little tricks that you'd learn from other bands, like the tape above the numbers. So you know what your settings had to be, or what was like another one? The type of strings you always need to buy because it was too thin, especially for a bass. If you got like
the weight, you need to have the weight and the type of style and the texture, like whether what type of outside texture they have, what brand you use. You got to be consistent. Or it messes everything up.
I fucking hated Ernie Ball strings. I couldn't stand them. They sucked.
You know what's funny is I still do that now in a weird way, right? Like Jeff and I started a new band not too long ago, and I now take a picture because we have a practice space somewhere else, and I take a picture because when I move my head or cabinet around or whatever, I take a picture of the settings because they're going to get moved around, and I got to make sure it goes back. So it's much more convenient now. You could just take a picture of it and make sure it's dialed in, and all my pedals are dialed in a certain way. And if I get a new sound during practice, take a new picture.
100%. I fucking all that shit. And before I jump into I want to talk about Equalvision and how you guys got on it, but like Chris from Lawrence Arms, he used to, when we went on tour with them, he would use this thing called Fast Fret, and he would run it on his strings, then clean it. And I remember that, and to this day, I haven't really played bass, and the last time was 2 years ago, but I would always get that shit, so it just sticks around. So, if anyone who's probably listening who plays an instrument, they're probably thinking, yes, I did that too. But, all right, so talk about, you're playing in Jersey, you guys are starting to get recognition, and then Jeff, was he your connection to Equalvision? Jeff Rickley?
So, a little bit. So, he was a big help and in guidance and all the guys from Thursday. But what kind of helped us get there a little bit more was we saved up money and got a couple $1,000s together to do a demo at Big Blue Meanie Studios, which was in Jersey City, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. And it was run by a guy named Tim Gillies, who is a great man. We were in there to do a demo to try to start sending it out to labels to, hopefully get somebody interested in signing us. And we had talked to a lot of bands who were signed, and we got all sorts of competing advice about which labels are good, which labels are bad, who should send it to. And we were trying to take it all in and had no idea what we were doing. When we were recording our songs, we were trying to get like 4 or 5 new songs down. We were struggling a little bit with the mix, and we were kind of a little bit bummed out that it wasn't sounding the way we wanted it to. And so we started talking to Tim, who's the owner, who hadn't been recording the demos we had gone in there. And he took a listen, and he was like, all right, well, listen, I'm gonna take over what you guys are doing here, and I'll remix this. And so we started working with Tim, and he started remixing things, and we started to get to know him a little bit better. And then he said, we showed him our previous record, and he's like, listen, we're going to record a couple of the songs out of this previous record. They're really great. Let's re-record them. So we do some more work with Tim, and by the grace of his kindness, he didn't charge us to re-record some of those older songs off the first record, Solutions Have Problems.
Shit.
And he helped us, and he re-recorded them, really liked them, and we basically had 10 songs all of a sudden. And then he went even further and was like, why don't we get this out to a few people? And like I said, this was, close to the time Full Collapse was being recorded or finished. And they were hanging out a bunch between shows and being at Big Blue. We started to figure out where we might send it out or who might be interested. And I really don't have all the details of how it came together. I wasn't the main person to kind of make this happen, but basically through Tim, with some help from Jeff Rickley and obviously Jeff and the other guys in the band, kind of like trying to make it happen. We got in contact with Equalvision. They heard the songs that we had been recording at Big Blue. And then they had some conversations. I'm sure they saw us play a couple times. Really foggy back then. It's been so long from now. And because that was, we at that point, that was 2000 and 2001. 2000 and 2001. We were in college. We had started college, and we would leave college every single weekend. We all went to 4 different schools in the area, and we went off and did shows, and then we'd spend our time like trying to get songs recorded and then get our name out there. And then it eventually came together, and in October of 2001, we signed with Equalvision. We met them at a show at CBGB's in New York, where I got to see Converge for the first time.
Oh my God.
I have the poster of the show because it's also the day that we got signed.
Oh, wow.
And I honestly, still thinking back on it, was so incredible. We went out to eat Indian food in New York. And, I grew up in New Jersey, and I went to school in Pennsylvania, and we would go into New York sometimes, but I was a kid. I didn't go hang out in New York all the time on my own.
Yeah.
It was either we were practicing or playing shows, or I was in school. So to be in New York and to be seeing this showcase of bands with Converge, watching Converge play, meeting everybody from Equalvision, and then going out to dinner and signing a record contract was probably the most surreal moment of my life. Because I was in Pennsylvania at the time for school and coming back and doing all that. And I remember I was on my way back to New Jersey anyways to go home to play shows, and they called me as I was driving onto the highway to start making my way from Lancaster to Summit. And they told me, we're going to sign with Equalvision. They want to sign us. And I almost crashed the car because I was on the on-ramp, and I was so surprised and so excited. I didn't know what to do with myself. I literally almost put the car into the side of the highway. And then a day or two later, there it was.
That's gnarly, dude. And you were 19, you said?
Yeah, we were 19.
Jesus Christ. Because at that time, Equalvision, who were the bands? Equalvision, I felt, in the early to mid 2000s really started taking off, but they had been around forever because a Shelter and
yeah.
I had this open in front of me. I mean, just 108, As Friends Rust, Bane, Boy Sets Fire. But these weren't the bands that got on there later on. Like they had like who was it? Fucking
Well, signed
Cirque
right
Survive and
before
shit
us.
like that, right?
Yeah, but they were a little after us, I'm pretty sure. So what happened right when we were there is right when we got signed, the albums that were just being released or about to be released was Jane Doe and the Give Blood by Bane, which are two of the best hardcore records of all time. And that Hope Conspiracy record, which I love to death. And Fairweather was on Equalvision, and Coheed and Cambria signed right before us.
Wow.
And Rocking Horse Winter, and I'm trying to think of some other bands that were on there. I'm blanking a little bit. There's another band that I can't remember. The Strider was there.
Yeah.
They were working on their second record.
Yep.
Which was also amazing. Jungle City Twitch with Diraj from Glassjaw.
Wait, who's Diraj from Glassjaw? What did
he was the drummer, and he was on Strider back then. And
wow.
He was originally in Glassjaw, and then he was in a bunch of other bands. I might be getting this wrong, but this is what I remember. So,
sounds right to me.
I may be getting everything completely incorrect, so nobody send me any hate messages for getting this wrong. But he was in Strider at that point, and that whole group was incredible. And I know I'm forgetting a couple of other bands because I can think of their album covers, but I can't think of the names. But that's Liars Academy. Liars Academy was there, and As Friends Rust came a little bit later to do an EP. But really the biggest thing that happened when we signed with Equalvision is that Coheed and Cambria had just signed a little bit before us, and there was a lot of talk about them.
Yeah. Did you feel like, what was I going to say, when you got on the label, was there a noticeable difference between the day before and the weeks or months after with shows, tours, anything?
That's a good question. I'm not 100% sure I have that clarity. It was really great to be like, we're on Equalvision to try to get shows. And we did actually do some shows when our album was going to come out. We did do showcase shows with other Equalvision bands. And when Second Stage Turbine Blade came out, Coheed had us play with them in Nyack, New York for their record release show. So there was a lot of cohabitating with other Equalvision bands. And I saw that kind of difference, but it was still really hard to, find a booking agent and do those types of things. So I definitely saw a difference, but there was still a lot of work and a lot of, kind of pushing and being an advocate for yourself to try to get involved or try to get on tours or, this, that, and the other, right? It just doesn't all come to you just because you get signed to a label. That's something we also had to learn, right? Or something I had to learn for sure, knowing that there's a lot of bands on Equalvision and they all need attention, and that's how it goes. And you have to just kind of vie for your time and try to get your opportunity and try to get on some shows. And we did have a lot of great shows, and we did do some great tours. I noticed them as being much better tours now than I did back then. You still had to kind of do your fight, but it was just a little bit of a different fight. And then, as some bands took off, it became a little bit more difficult to try to get as many bigger tours or whatever you could say.
Because the sound was different, or more the focus was?
Well, I remember we played a lot of shows with Coheed early on, and we knew how incredible they were. Everybody knew how incredible they were, and they kept telling us that we were amazing, and we really appreciated that. We liked the way that we sounded, and we liked our songs and our album, obviously. But they started taking off pretty quickly, and our albums were released on the same day, March 5th, 2002. And a lot of focus has to go into the bands that are kind of skyrocketing and moving forward and totally exploding onto the scene, right? When you're trying to vie for space in the ad buys that Equalvision does, whether it's an AP or other things like that or radio, it's hard when other bands are exploding and you're trying to, also be on there. It's hard. They can't choose. They can't promote everybody at the same level all the time, right?
Yeah. I mean, it literally is that. The hard thing at being a band is that you're creative, and the creativity gets in the way of it. It's just like black and white. It's just business.
Oh yeah, and like I said, like back then, I'm sure I didn't take things super well, and I'm sure I had lots of, weird feelings about thinking that I wasn't getting enough tension or we weren't getting enough focus and this, that, and the other, right? Like I'm sure I had all sorts of up and down feelings about it. But, we still played a bunch of incredible shows, did some great tours, got to play with all these bands. I mean, I remember playing with Bane and just being beside myself. I was so happy. And then all the shows we did do with Coheed, and those guys were absolutely incredible, and amazing, amazing guys. Just all the things that we did get to do. But then, as a 19-year-old kid, you focus on why weren't we in this demo disc, or
totally,
why weren't we on that tour? It's like, well, not everybody can do that. But you don't know that when you're that young and you have this opportunity. You're just thinking that you want everything to happen for you.
Yeah, like I totally get how, again, just from a business standpoint, it's like you're going to be on a label and you're going to see where they're going to pay their attention to. Because you said it earlier, you're right. They only have so much bandwidth.
Yeah.
And
they do.
They have X amount of people, and you got to think from internally, from a top perspective of a business, they are looking down and saying, all right, well, what's going to drive revenue for us to keep the lights on and keep, it's like they got to balance all that shit. So it's a hard pill to swallow when, you're not the, you might not be the first in line, but
right,
then
the first focus. And
right.
Then there's the other piece, right? Like it's the booking agent piece. And back then, a booking agent seemed to provide a lot of help for bands who were trying to get on longer run tours. And we never really had like an official booking agent we were signed with. And I think that what we didn't really realize back then, even though we knew that was a component of how that was still going to be a difficult task to achieve. Mm-hmm. To help you get on some of those tours. Because after that, it was like play as much as you possibly can. Now, we still did tour, and we did a bunch of tours. But, there's so many components in that early time period being on an indie label to try to find your way to success.
Did you guys ever – I don't think I ever thought about this, or maybe even asked this question. For all the Jersey bands – I mean, this could apply to any band across the country, but – growing up in Jersey, and this whole thing starting off focusing on Jersey, which was the greatest scene in the world.
Hell yeah. Hell yeah.
Like we, in the late 90s, all those shows existed in Legion halls, and bands played all the time locally, and none of them were really going out. It's like Bigwig, they'd go out, but they'd always come back to this like warm welcome. But I feel like bands that were from Jersey in the early 2000s, they'd spend all their time on the road. Did you guys ever come back and actually play Legion Hall shows or try to do like local shows?
I think that was something we should have done more of. When we got signed in 2001, we basically started touring. That was the end of 2001. We started touring that winter, and we almost didn't stop touring until we broke up. So we played some shows in New Jersey, but we never spent enough time coming back and being in a lot of those types of Legion Hall, church, rec center type shows. Now, we did a lot of them early on before we got signed in the late 90s and in 2000 and early 2001.
Yeah.
We tried to do that as much as possible. Played everywhere, Fire Escape, wherever. Wayne Firehouse, like all the places that we could get to, we did as much as possible. Who would ever have us? But when we got signed, it was tour. And so, I think we probably should have played more shows in New Jersey.
Well, why do you think
it was so great?
Why do you think that so many bands? It's like, now that I really think about it, it's like we all kind of gave up on the scene. Like, I mean, its demise is really on. I mean, I give myself shit for it. Not shit for it, but I mean, I literally left New Jersey in 2001, didn't come back until 2004. So I completely abandoned it. And it's cool that we all remember. And it's like, it was a thing, and it's not like it's the thing itself is sad. But if you look back at that time, like, it seems like everyone just kind of just like bounced on it. They're like, all right.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's a really good question. I think that our focus was so much on the future that we didn't give a lot of mental, thought and consideration to the scene back in New Jersey at that point, because it was all about expanding audience. But I think, looking back, I will say that maybe a mistake was that we didn't have enough of a base, right? I remember seeing other bands go home and us playing shows in their home, and there just being tons of kids there, right? Like, you're always going to do huge numbers at home. We didn't necessarily do quote unquote huge numbers at home, because as soon as we got any recognition, we were signed and then we were on the road, if that makes sense.
Right? Yeah,
like,
totally.
It's like we almost kind of skipped over having the huge audience at home, which could have, wasn't great.
I mean, I think of it this way, in a metaphorical way. It's like going to high school and you were not really, you weren't in a certain crowd. And when you were done with high school, you wanted to get the fuck out of there and just go explore the world. And not like there was any reason to go back to high school by any means afterwards, but it's almost kind of like, or like your town where you grew up in that you didn't really attach to, and you were like wanting to get out and go to a big city or something, and you never go back. It's like, it's a lot shinier. But at the same time, though, it's like, now that I'm kind of contradicting myself, it's like, but you also did love the town or the metaphorical school that you're in. It is funny to me, though, that I've never really thought about that.
I mean, I love the scene. I loved it so much. It was what we did. It was like a community. I connected way closer with them than with the people in my high school. And we all felt such a strong bond. And I would not have been a musician in a serious sense if it had not been for the New Jersey scene. And I think it was just a consequence of trying to make it in the music industry that we kind of left it behind. It was never ill will. It was more like, now it is time to move forward. And it's, it is a bummer in how it kind of, whittled away, if you will. But it was, man, I got nothing but love for all of that. It was so influential. It was so much fun. It was every weekend. It was every show that you could get to. And it was just seeing the people that just being in those groups, being at those venues, whether you were playing or not playing, and talking to people. Oh man, I loved the hell out of it. And it just kind of evolved into a place where we were trying to do other things as a band.
Here's a question. How much time do you think you would have spent going to shows if you weren't in a band?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a really good question.
Like, really, you got to think about it,
it probably would have been less. I was a fan of so many groups out there, but it was definitely a mix, right? We were there. We were always playing shows as much as possible. So probably one show a weekend if we could make it happen. Sometimes two when we were able to get more shows. And then we would try to go to other shows to see bands that we loved or make more connections or meet people there. So I probably would have gone to fewer shows, honestly, because it would have been fun, but I wouldn't have had the same attachment if I wasn't also in a band that was playing some of these shows. It just felt more like home. And I'm sure I could be completely wrong. I could have been a guy who went to all the shows and just loved it for what it was. But I think one of my biggest attractions was that it was like home, with people that you played with and other people that you liked going to shows with, and kind of everything together, right? I think it was a big component for us to be in a band that got to play some of those shows.
I wonder if our younger selves, like everyone listening to this podcast, right, and who's been interviewed or who listens, if our younger selves had a chance to listen to these episodes and the stories that we tell and the way that we tell them, I wonder what, this is a very out there scenario, but I wonder what younger us's would think about the shit we're saying now, if they would agree or if they would disagree, do we see it 100%? Is it because it's nostalgia? Did we really see it like that? I mean, I feel, thinking back then, I always had this love all the time when I was there, but I wonder if younger us would be like, You guys are really sugarcoating this shit.
That's like you bring up a good point. There was drama. There was drama back then. There was plenty of drama. When you see other people talking to more popular bands or hearing them get signed or trying to have conversations with more popular other bands and stuff who you're trying to get like the time of day from. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I feel like I'm sure there was lots of drama, or not going to shows because you're like, man, I don't want to see those guys. They didn't like talk to us last time. Like, whatever, man, I'm moving on. Like, I'm sure it's nostalgia. Nostalgia plays a huge role here. And like I said, I mean, I'm sure I acted like a fool so many times thinking that we were somehow better than other people or other bands, which just wasn't the case. So, I agree. That's a really good point. Our younger selves would be giving me the finger pretty heavily.
Yeah. I think it is better. I mean, I try to take, I don't know if you do this now because some podcasts talk about the present, some talk about the past. This one obviously focuses on a past that you lived in and you've heard a couple episodes. So it's like you've had a way to like open up your mind or remember that time. I try to take a lot of these stories, and a lot of people have told these stories where they look back and they're like, man, I really handled that shitty. And it's like, I try to take all of this and apply that like now on the way that I handle things. I definitely have a short fuse with things, but it's not like I was when I was 19, but I quickly recognize it and I can get over it because I'm older. But this is almost like, this is like kind of helps me moving forward, where if I was to look at my life, if I was, 20 years from now, if I'm looking back, am I enjoying this time as much as I did back then? And am I also, what's the word, like, making the better decisions, like the right decisions, instead of like putting myself in a jam or make myself look like a fucking idiot. Later on.
I think we're definitely doing better jobs now than we were back then, and I think that's partly because we kind of had some of those experiences and realized, oh man, I was really young. Now you can have that context, and you're always going to look back and wish you had done, maybe some different choices. Maybe you didn't enjoy yourself as much as you should have in some moments, but I bet we're both doing a better job now than we were back then.
Yeah, I'd hope so. I mean, it's like
let's hope so.
I have the list open in front of me because I went to the Equalvision Wikipedia earlier just to look at the bands when I asked the question about what bands were going on at that time, and they have the current artists and they have like the older artists, and what it prompted a question. What was the sickest show or the sickest tour? Either the sickest show you guys played or the sickest tour you guys did. Or it might have been the sickest show on tour.
I'm going to give you two answers here. So forgive me for doing that. But,
totally fine.
We did 3 EVR showcase shows a few days after our record was released, and it was Strider, Fairweather, Liars Academy, Asfen's Rust, Coheed and Cambria, and us. And we did this like 3 shows in a row, 3 different towns on the East Coast, close to each other. So it wasn't like we had to drive around a ton. It was like, I think it was Baltimore, New Jersey, and then somewhere else. And they were amazing because we had such an experience to be, especially as the newest guys around, just kind of be feeling like a part of it, if that makes sense. Like I really just felt so included to be on showcase shows on the label that we were on. And it just felt so good. It was so EVR. It was so us. It was so all these bands, and seeing all these people come out to the shows and everybody liking all the groups. It was such a great 3 days. And we got to hang out together since it was like short and not too long. You know what I mean? And most of us were supporting new releases. And it just felt so great to do that, right? We would, hang out in the evenings and just like get to know some of these guys really well. And it was so much fun. And then the other thing I'd have to point to, just by sheer size and kind of holy shit feeling afterwards. And I'm going through my list. I have a list so I can get some of this right here. Where's that show? That one show right at the end of Prevent Falls, We were doing a tour with Under Oath in January of 2003. I think so. January 2003. We actually toured with Under Oath twice.
Wow.
Back in the day. And so that show was in St. Petersburg, Florida, at the State Theater.
Oh my God, that's like their hometown or home area.
It was their hometown. It was sold out beyond capacity. It was probably close to 1,000 people, and it was us, Fire When Ready, Under Oath, Norma Jean, Against Me, Cool Hand Luke, In Passing, and like a bunch more bands. And I was on a stage where I could barely see Jeff. And we used to stand next to each other. I could see the stage was so big and there were so many people. He was so far away. I was like, holy cow. And even though we knew the band was kind of at least going into a break, we eventually, kind of decided to call it quits. But even though we knew that show was overwhelmingly exciting. It just had this feeling. It was so massive. And for some reason, they put us on like third to last, even though all these bands, because we were the main support for Under Oath on that tour. It was a tour where the first half was Beloved, and the second half was Under Oath, and Fire When Ready was with us the entire time. And it just kind of felt like, well, I think in my heart I kind of knew it was coming to an end, and I just felt like, well, shit, if this is coming to an end, then this is worth it. This way is incredible. So I felt that was probably the holy shit show that I think I had. If I'm sure there's a couple other I'm going to remember, but that's going to be my answer there.
Wow. It's in the early 2000s when all the new bands started popping up, and I've spoken now about how much I did not like them just because I didn't like where everything was going, and then I found the bands that I loved. Under Oath would have been one of those bands where I was like, fuck this band. I love Under Oath. I fucking love that band. I love the drama that I keep reading about them. I love how they've come back, and they're like, like Aaron. I mean, Aaron's
Can I tell you a story?
Please.
A couple stories about this quickly.
Yeah.
So we were in the early Under Oath days before They're Only Chasing Safety comes out, right? And so this is when Dallas, the old lead singer who goes on to do a bunch of his own great music, was still in the band. And I remember, so we had a tour with Sky Came Falling and Under Oath in the summer before that, summer of 2002. And unfortunately, that tour was cut off early. It was August of 2002. But we did get 6 or 7 shows in with them, and they were starting to blow up, right? Their album before They're Only Chasing Safety was starting to get some big hype. They had a really kind of like a single coming along, and they had just come off the Zayo like final tour that they had done. So they were like kind of doing their thing, and they were just passing through, and it was us, Sky Came Falling, and Under Oath. And I remember the first show that we played with them. We met them, and they were really nice guys. And we go and we play, and then they come on stage and they start playing, and I didn't know Under Oath back then, right? Like I'd heard somebody gave me music to listen to before we toured with them. But we get there, they start playing their first show, and no joke, Dallas, the lead singer, like drop kicks one of the guitar players, and it was one of the older guitar players who ended up leaving.
Okay.
And it was pandemonium. Like it was just like in the middle of the first song, and then the crowd went absolutely ballistic, and I was like, I've never seen anything like this. This is incredible. And I loved every second of it. And what was so awesome is, even though that tour got canceled, we played a few shows with them, and then after a few of them, we would each you would do your sound check, and you would do those things, and we were playing some songs. And one time Under Oath was sound checking, and they sound checked one of our songs that was newer, and it sounded so much better than when we played it. They made our song sound so much better, and we were like, holy cow. And then another time we got there early enough at the next venue that they started to hear some of the songs that would eventually become some of the songs on They're Only Chasing Safety. They were starting to, like just play some of the riffs and some of the thoughts they had. And I was like, oh my God, they're getting even better and even better. And little did we know back then what it was going to be like.
Yeah.
We were lucky enough to tour with them twice and have some really great memories. And they were the biggest shows we played. We even shared some Warped Tour dates with them, and we're able to do just a bunch of great shows. And just watching them perform every night made everything worth it, right? Like I mean, just watching them play was incredible.
So
I love that band.
Even their newer record, it's good. The three prior to it, I'm not gonna talk about Under Oath the rest of the time, but like even when Aaron left and Spencer took on all the singing, I was like, shit. And they got the drummer from Norma Jean. I was like,
yeah,
oh, fuck, these guys still got it.
Yeah.
And I think it was probably just the fact that maybe the lesser use of cocaine might have affected the new album. I mean, hey, it's said publicly,
that's funny
so
because that's funny because back when we played with them, we were the quote unquote bad boys, right? Like, we did nothing bad, like we drank and I wanted to smoke cigarettes all the time. But like, they were just awesome. They were just an awesome band that toured like motherfuckers. They would just go and get it done, It wasn't, they were just kicking ass and taking names. It wasn't like a party scene for them when we were playing with them. I was just in awe of how awesome they were.
So it kind of leads to my close to the last couple questions. Seeing that, because you had mentioned this was like pretty much around the time where you felt that the end was near and you guys broke up afterwards. When you're watching bands like this, or even maybe these guys, did you feel that there was something happening in your brain where you're thinking, it's almost like, how can I explain this? If I trained for a marathon and I completed it, and then my buddy just comes in, he's like, yeah, I just completed an ultra, 100-mile. And I'm like, it took me so much energy just to do the 26.2 miles. I don't have it in me to do the 100. I'm going to stop. Did you feel that seeing a band like Under Oath and how gigantic they were getting, did you kind of feel like there's no way we're going to get to that? And that kind of like helped you, it kind of like maybe internally helped with, not helped, but like affected your decision to stay together as a band?
Well, maybe that was an influence. I would say the bigger thing was that after Nash and PJ went to Armor for Sleep, Jeff and I had a difficult time finding permanent replacement members. And we struggled with that. We had played so long with Nash and PJ that it was just, we were truly like a family at that point. I spent more time with them than I spent with anybody else. So when we were trying to get people to fill in, and we had some great fill-ins, we really did. We did a tour with Jeff Kapanik, who was the drummer for Tabula Rasa, who was out of Pittsburgh. We had a short time playing with a bunch of other really great musicians, we had time with Brian Carley and Tim Brennan, who you've interviewed prior. And we did some shows with them.
Oh,
towards
really?
the end as well. Yeah.
Wait,
yeah.
Did Tim mention that in his interview?
Yeah, a little bit. He mentioned that a little bit about how he kind of played with us for a little while, and we were thinking about changing our name and doing some stuff like that. And then he got the opportunity to be in Dropkick, and then you got the opportunity to be in Dropkick. So, I mean,
yeah.
Yep. So I think for us the bigger issue, because that happened just a little bit after, the bigger issue was finding permanent members that we felt really connected with and felt the same type of closeness with that we had with Nash and PJ. And that was hard. On top of that, we were deferring from college. We had recorded some new demos. It just didn't seem like a totally clear path for us. And while we had done some great tours, we did a long tour with As Friends Rust. We did a couple tours with Under Oath. We toured with Beloved. We toured with Whippersnapper. We toured with Narcissus out of Ohio. We did a bunch of shows with a bunch of great bands. We did something like 200 to 250 dates that year.
Oh my God.
And, we also, probably a little bit about what you're saying. We didn't really feel a lot of the return on some of the investment. Now, listen, now looking back, a lot of those bands had been doing it for a long time and had been suffering the way that we had been suffering for long stretches before things broke for them, right? Like that, I had a narrow point of view at that time that we wanted more to be happening faster because we started that band when we were so young. By the time our album released in 2002, some of those songs were as old, like 6 to 8 years old. You know, we were ready to keep moving forward and evolving and growing. So I think it's a little bit of what you said. You're seeing other bands kind of take off and other groups move forward, do bigger tours, more recognition, do music videos, maybe sign to a major label, do things like that. And you feel like you're kind of stuck and maybe not getting there. But we also hadn't had the opportunity to put the time in. And because we had lost Nash and PJ, we didn't feel like we had the right group of people to keep moving forward. And we're worried about that kind of risk reward of, do we keep doing this or do we regroup, go back to school, and then see how we can get back into it? And we chose the latter.
Do you think that, because I've seen plenty, I mean, we've all seen so many bands that were blowing up back then, blew up, became gigantic, and now, 20 years later, 15 years later, like, some bands are still putting out records, and they're still trying to tour, and I don't know, like, there's no way they're going to live off of this forever, which we all thought we would, any of us in a band, all we wanted to do was play.
Boy, did I think that was going to happen, that I was going to live off of it forever. Boy, I had no idea.
So watching these bands now who did put in a good run, and you could see that some of them now are having a hard time fill clubs, and they're still doing it. Do you feel like if things were going well, do you wish that you would have stayed with it, or you're like, I'm actually glad I stopped when I did?
So like, that's a super great question. And I think that's something I probably grapple with, and not like grapple with like, I wish I'd made a different decision. I mean, sometimes I do, but I think that's the ultimate question for me in my life when it comes to music, which is, if I had pushed, instead of kind of being like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, if I had been the opposite and kind of gone along and been like, yes, Jeff, like, let's keep going, and pushing him even farther, and us like really digging in, still deferring from school, still finding new band members who are permanent, maybe finding a new label and doing all those things, and then is going, I do wonder what could have happened if I had another shot with other songs and more experience under my belt, having done tours and knowing that it isn't easy, and knowing that it isn't just going to come just because I'm there and because we got signed,
Yeah.
Being honest with my mentality back then, could I have done a better job, had a better understanding, put in more time, made more great music, had more complete lineup, and gone forward? I do wonder what could have been. At the same time, I went back, I finished college, I struggled with a career for a while, then I found my career, found my wife, have a family, have done decent for myself, and I don't know if I would have had that opportunity if I had been still playing music right now, having not really kind of, made enough money to be successful, so to speak. So it's both, really. I lean more towards, I was really lucky, I had a few great moments, but this was the right path. I am where I'm supposed to be right now, and that's true. But if you gave me the opportunity to go back on tour and it would have no effect in my life, I would do that immediately.
Interesting.
I miss it. I just miss it. I miss playing. I miss that type of, experience and doing the touring thing. But I wouldn't sacrifice my life for it. But boy, I wish there was an alternate universe where I could go experience it.
You never know, man. maybe, yeah. I wouldn't say I'm a big religious man, but maybe the next round is like you get to do all the shit that you didn't get to do. It's right. But I mean, like, that was a great answer. I mean, I think what triggered that is I've seen bands now. Like I saw Glassjaw a couple years ago, and I love Glassjaw and the newer
I do
stuff.
too. I
It's
love them.
yeah, like I just got Worship and Tribute on vinyl, and I've spun it so many times because that record to me. I even thought of it the other day. If I was on a desert island, I literally thought. Actually, I thought of this yet last night. If I was on a desert island and had a choice of an album or two, I'd bring that. I don't know how I'd
Life
play it,
changing.
but
That
yeah,
record is life changing.
I fucking love it. And my buddy Bob one time, he's like, "All right, I think I'm ready to give Glassjaw a chance." So I send him Aptos Mill or however you say that. That I love how I love the band and I still can't even pronounce a song. But he's like, "Nope, can't do it." He's like, "The guy just fucking reminds me of Snagglepuss." And
That's
holy
funny.
fuck, did I was like, "Yeah, dude, you kind of nailed it."
Yeah.
But I saw them play, and Daryl back in the day, I saw them back in the early in like mid 2000s, and he fucking owned it. And now I see it, I'm like, man, you are mailing it in. And I
Yeah,
bet he's
it's
burned
got to
out.
be a struggle, right? It's
Yeah,
got to be a struggle if this is the career that is your life and is something you can't give up. And I can completely understand that sentiment. And you've gone so long and you've had a success, but sustaining that success is incredibly difficult.
yeah,
I'm sure because it's just not just I'm going to put more music out and do more touring. There's just so many nuances. Like there's things that are just the music industry is a game of chance and nothing is guaranteed. So having to sustain it for so long, very few bands get to do that. So I can only imagine how difficult that must be if you're not getting the return that you want.
I mean, any band is gonna burn out.
Yeah.
Even like the fucking Rolling Stones, like they get up on stage and play and stuff, and they're up there. I mean, I'm sure they're mailing it in, but they put on a show because it's all they know what to do. That all they know how to do. But like it's interesting to think about bands that think about that time because there's different steps of success, quote unquote success that a band gets to, right? Kind of going back to the question I had earlier where when you guys got an Equalvision and you're seeing all these bands that were older than you, dissipate and they never even got on a label. So there's the bands that do really shitty in the scene. And then there's the ones that do well, like really well, and they're like the top ones, but then they break up before getting the label. And there's the bands that do better than them and they get on the label. And then they tour with the bands that are bigger than them, like, and there's all these tiers.
Oh
But,
yeah, especially back then. There were so many tiers of bands and where your status was, and I'm sure it's still the same now. But I have no idea how a younger music scene works. You
Oh
know what I mean?
God,
I've
no idea.
no idea what it is that people do. Even though we're starting a new band, but really it's just for fun, right?
Yeah.
Like we're not touring or anything. It's more like we'll play in Los Angeles and release music, and everything is so different. You can put things out and get people to hear your songs without needing to be on a label. But back then it was such a tier system, just all the different levels, those starting out, those who got noticed, those who kind of skipped over needing to be popular in the scene.
Those that never got recognition, those that never
Yeah,
got
those who
recognition
didn't
that
get
should have.
recognition, those who like put in like were like the opening band for forever and they never really got a big shot at it.
Yeah.
Some that flamed out really quick. We were a band that got on a label and then we did some great shows and some great tours, but we didn't have a ton of success. Got to play with some bands who ended up being huge. That was amazing. Like looking back and thinking about how many bands that we played a show with that ended up being popular is amazing. I feel so lucky to have done that.
Yeah, man. I mean, I guess it's more about, not more about, but it is about just there's people who can look back at that time and it's like the Al Bundys, right? And they're like they scored 4 touchdowns and that's all they did, and then they just hate their life
Totally.
after that, right? But there's the ones that we can look back. Like I love the fact that I stopped when I did, and I never wanted to go back and continue to play. Like I love the fact that I took the creative thing and advance in different directions with it because it's more enjoyable to me now and it's more sustainable, and I don't really see
absolutely.
I get to control that, and you're saying with your career and like going to school and you said getting married and having kids.
Yeah.
And, it's like those things are amazing things. It's the people that look back and are like, yeah, but at the same time, it was eventually going to end again, as you can see that with seeing bands that are playing now and they are mailing it in or even if they're not, they're still doing this thing, being like, shit, maybe I didn't want to do this. Like maybe maybe I should have stopped.
It's tough. I can only imagine how tough it is when you don't feel like I kind of feel lucky that I had an opportunity to kind of change direction. I had a bunch of middle years there that were tough too, trying to find out what I was going to do. But looking at my life now, I now just feel fortunate that I had both. Did it end up the way I wanted to with Prevent Falls? No. I wish we had so many more records, and I wish we had so many more tours and had a lot more success. But boy, do I feel so lucky to play the hundreds of shows that we did, tour everywhere that we went to tour, play with the bands that we did, get signed by a record label. I have so much pride in just having ever been signed, releasing a record that was in stores for people to purchase, being on the radio, this type of stuff, like no matter how small it was, like being on TV in Canada, like stuff like little things like that. I just feel so much pride about, especially because I have the life that I have now and feel as lucky as I do.
Yeah. So fuck you, bands that made it.
Fuck you guys.
Oh, I love having a podcast.
Yeah, it's great.
Fuck, there was a question I was gonna have before I was gonna end this.
I've got just about one more. I got to get out of here before a touch before 2.
Okay. Actually, then I can't remember what it was gonna. Oh, was Equalvision? Did you have any record deals left with them after you guys broke up, or was it just like a clean break?
Well, we had signed. They had decided not to pick up our option, right? So we had a 1 with 2 options, if I'm remembering correctly. So we had like one record that we were going to do, and then we could have up to 2 more records with them, and it was a label option whether to pick us up. And they funded some demos that we did. They really liked them, but I think they decided not to move forward because it wasn't, I don't know. They decided not to move over because, the first album wasn't a huge success. We didn't have 4 members at that time, and it just, it was tough. We were concerned about, leaving our education completely unfinished. So I think we were both caught in a hard place. I think the label didn't know what to do, even though they loved the music, and we didn't know what to do because we didn't feel like we had done enough with the first record, and wanted to make another record. So we were just kind of at an impasse. We moved on from there.
Well, I think that's a perfect way to go into the last 2 questions. So because you got like 8 minutes, we'll make it quick. First thing, what do you want to plug?
2 things I want to plug. I started this project a little while ago to kind of redo the band history and like kind of keep track of it. As a result of that, we started a little Instagram. It's just @PreventFalls. For anybody who liked our band at all, feel free to take a look and see what it is that we post. We don't post too much, but we have old pictures, old flyers, things like that. And as a consequence, Jeff and I have reconnected with Nash and PJ, and we're currently re-recording songs from our first record, just a couple of them. Our first record, Solutions Have Problems, which came out in 99 and 2000. And we're going to put it out on Spotify. And hopefully that happens in a little while. And hopefully people who enjoyed that album or didn't hear that record because it wasn't put out by a label will get a chance to hear it. So you can find us on Spotify and you can find us on Instagram. It's just @PreventFalls. And I really hope we're having a lot of fun. We're remotely recording and sending each other files, and we're going to get it mixed. So we'll re-release that first record and put out a new, re-recorded versions of those songs. So if you want to hear what almost 40-year-olds sound like playing 16-year-old songs, get ready. You'll be excited about that. And the last thing I want to promote real quick, and thank you for letting me do this.
Fuck yeah, man.
Jeff and I started a new band. We're called The Town War. We are recording our first song called 9 Lives, and it's almost done, and we're going to put that out on Spotify and try to get it out to everybody. We think people who liked Prevent Falls or some of the other groups that we had in between will really dig us, so you can find us at The Town War, and you'll be able to find us on Spotify hopefully soon.
Sweet, man. All right, real quick, or not real quick, what scene ethics do you hold on to this day?
I think what I hold on to is just kind of, I don't know if I'd call it ethics. I'd call it like the camaraderie. And for me, it extends a little bit past New Jersey. It's also like Pennsylvania and some other scenes that we got to have like a little bit of an experience with. I always felt just like such comfort and providing people with like a feeling of being around family and being around close friends and feeling comfortable with who you are and the type of music that you liked and the style you wanted. what's great is, we played with this band called the Nightmare Scenario, who are from Williamsport, Pennsylvania. They were a hardcore band. And I always got along with the singer, Nathan, so much. And we stayed close, we stayed in just enough connection with each other that he told me he was moving to Los Angeles a couple years ago, and now he's one of my closest friends. And that's kind of what it is for me. It's this ethics of just always being there for each other and always having each other's back and just providing that family and support.